Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, a real pleasure, Sam. Always enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many things that we would love to talk with you about. I know we only have so much time, so we'll get right into it. We're kind of going conference to conference. Our Matt does this a lot for us, and I'm going to do my best at going through the standings here. But as we look at the ACC, one of our bowl partners with the Pop Tarts Bowl, you see that there is Miami's at the top. Clemson has kind of made their way back there after an unassuming start. But some of the other teams there jump out at me. Pitt, SMU, Duke, even Syracuse is not always necessarily top of the ACC teams. What is your impression of what's been going on in the ACC so far this season? And do you expect those teams to stick?
At the start of the year, Sam, I thought maybe just one, possibly two ACC teams would qualify for the playoff, but this year it looks like as many as three could. The path is there for Clemson, Miami, and SMU. Those three teams don't even play each other. I can see all three teams finishing with an 8-0 record. And then good luck to the tiebreaker situation for the ACC. But those three teams look like the best teams in the ACC to me right now. And all three should be favored in all the rest of their games. I could see all three of them finishing 8-0 in conference play. Now, Pitt's been a great story this year, opening up undefeated as they have. They've got to play a lot of the big boys down the stretch. Duke comes in 2-1, Syracuse 2-1. I think Virginia Tech has probably the best chance of the 2-1s of finishing out strong. But to me, it looks like a three-horse race for the top of the ACC with Clemson, Miami, and SMU.
Do you see one of those teams as a potential national championship threat? Should they all get into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think that I do think that the Big Ten and the SEC teams are probably a step ahead. But Clemson, Miami, and SMU have all been very impressive. Probably the most impressive of the two, or of the three, are Clemson and Miami. Miami's got Cam Ward at quarterback. Clemson, of course, after that poor start against Georgia, they brought in their freshman receivers, played them more, and now all of a sudden, Cade Klubnik looks good. They've got the defense. And they've been giving up a lot of points late in games when up big. So their defense is actually better than they are statistically. I think Clemson and Miami are two teams that can get to the playoff and win in the playoff.
So as we move to the other half of the Pop Tarts Bowl matchup, we got a Big 12 that is we talk all the time about how it becomes just kind of very congested and everybody's beating each other, and that it sort of seems to be the case rolling out again this year. I know UCF fans are probably disappointed to see them off to a 1-3 start in the conference after a strong start to the year, but there's basically everybody's got two or three losses in the conference at this point, except for those top two, handful, that top group, and then we see that Colorado, for example, isn't eligible for our bowl, so it's one that we're not looking as closely at. That's on the screen here. You see the ones with the asterisks, so the old Pac-12 teams that are still tied into Pac-12 bowl affiliations. So, when you look at this, BYU is obviously been tremendous this year. They had a really exciting win over Oklahoma State last Friday. Do you see their run continuing this week against UCF? And what do you make of the rest of the Big 12 from there?
I think when you look at the Big 12 this year, it's just as you said, Sam. It is a one where everybody's beating each other up. I do feel the best team in the Big 12 right now is Iowa State. And I'll take you back to my conversation, Sam, that I had with Coach Campbell post spring. And every time, we go over every player on the team, conversations generally last about an hour when I talk to the coaches. And after going through every player on the position, I asked Coach how he feels about the position. And almost every single group, he said, Phil, he said, either the most talented we've been since I've been here, the most experienced we've been since I've been here, or the best we've had since I've been here. So I thought Iowa State would have Matt Campbell's best team, and they've lived up to that. Even last week, they gave up two interception returns for touchdowns and still won the game outright. I think Iowa State's probably your best team in the Big 12. The big question is who's going to play them in the Big 12 title game. BYU's got a shot. I don't know if they're going to be able to hold on to this early great start they had. They do have a tough schedule coming up. Kansas State's in the mix. The winner of this week's Cincinnati-Colorado game, I think, is going to be huge as far as that goes. But to me, the Big 12 remains a wide open race, and I think we're going to see a lot of upsets through the rest of the year. It wouldn't surprise me to see a 2 or 3 loss team in the Big 12 title game.
As I jump ahead, we always do a little roundup each week of the bowl prognosticators around the country, and you see some of the matchups here that people are projecting. We didn't talk about Notre Dame when we went through the ACC, but they're a bowl partner via the ACC. Is there anything about Notre Dame's effort so far that stood out to you, or anything you see coming down the pike for them?
Yeah, the Irish, I think, have a great shot at finishing 11-1 this year and of making the playoff. When you look at Notre Dame, they have been losing some key players to injury this year, but Riley Leonard's getting better and better as a passer each week. The defense has been dominant. Last week against Georgia Tech, held them to just 333 yards. In fact, they're holding opponents to 110 yards below their season average this year. So Notre Dame is a very strong team. I expect them to go 11-1 this year and make the playoff.
And if they did, it would be hard to see them, I think, in the in the Pop Tarts Bowl in that case. But that's what we see in these projections all the time is that they'll change week over week. We often see 8 totally different matchups one week from the week before. So it'll be interesting to see what next week's projections look like after this weekend's results. As we look at the SEC, or Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, half of that matchup, you've got again, it's interesting, I guess, to not see the traditional, Alabama or Georgia at the top of that standing there, or at least as far as conference record is concerned. Do you figure one of them ends up there at the end, or can Texas A&M or LSU run the table in this conference?
I still think that when it all shakes out in the SEC, it's going to be Georgia against Texas with the rematch of last week's game for the SEC title game. Texas A&M does have to play Texas. LSU's got to play Alabama coming up, so there's some tough games coming up. LSU's got a tough one this week against Texas A&M. So one of those two teams going to absorb a loss this week. The winner puts themselves in great shape. But I think when it all shakes out, keep your eyes on Georgia and Texas. I think those are the two teams that rise to the top of the SEC and end up playing for the SEC title game.
Yeah, we see Tennessee there at 3-1 and 6-1 overall. We mentioned when we talked with Coach Bielema earlier that they're one of just 2 teams in the country with 3 top 25 wins so far this year. What do you make of our recent Cheez-It Citrus Bowl champions and their odds of making their way into a playoff this year?
I think Tennessee. You're talking about Tennessee right now?
Yes. Sorry,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think Tennessee's got a great shot of making the playoff. They only have one loss this year. You look at the rest of their schedule, you figure they're probably going to lose at Georgia, but a 2-loss Tennessee easily makes it, especially with the convincing win the nice win they had over Alabama last week. Playing in the SEC, it's a grueling schedule each week. I think you're going to see multiple 2-loss teams make the playoff, maybe even see a 3-loss team make the playoff. So I think if Tennessee, even if they lose to Georgia, a 10-2 Tennessee team probably makes the playoff.
And what is if you were pegged to guess right now, do you think it's 4 playoff teams for the SEC? Five, could they wiggle their way to 5 somehow, or are we looking at 3 or 4 out of the SEC?
At the start of the year, Sam, I was thinking it would be 4 to 5 SEC teams, 3 to 4 Big Ten teams. So I do think at least 4 SEC teams make the playoff this year. The fact that the ACC right now is getting all these wins, and you have those 3 teams that could end up with maybe 1 loss at the end of the year, I think the ACC has a chance of grabbing one or two of those spots. But I definitely see 4 SEC teams making a playoff this year.
Yeah, I know that not on our screen, but Mickey mentioned it earlier, so I want to throw it out there for you. What do you think of the possibility of an Army-Navy game to decide a playoff spot? How does that sound to you?
Wow, I would love it as a college football fan to have Army and Navy relevant again and playing in a big game like that. That would be a phenomenal game. Just you look at your best matchups every year, Sam. They're the rivalries, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn, and of course Army Navy. And to have Army Navy have so much on the line, that would be phenomenal. I'm rooting for it. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would find that a very exciting way to close the regular season for sure. As we look at the Big Ten, you mentioned Ohio State, Michigan. We'll have in a few weeks down the line, but right now we see Indiana and Oregon and Penn State at the top of the Big Ten undefeated. And I don't know that anybody would have necessarily circled Indiana specifically to be in that position. And what has what has led to this kind of outburst from Indiana? Do you think they can maintain this momentum throughout the second half of the season?
I think Indiana's a potential playoff team. When I talked to Coach Signetti going over the team with them post spring, I was very bullish on Indiana. Picked them way higher than everybody else. They were picked 17th in the Big Ten media poll. I had a middle of the pack. I was a little afraid to put them any higher, but they're a great story. They've got an outstanding defense. They brought over a lot of the James Madison kids with them, where they had a great defense at James Madison. They brought in Curtis Rourke, who was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. Now, Rourke got injured but I think Taven Jackson is going to step in and do well. They've got a four-headed monster at running back with Ellison, Lawson, Black, and Green. This is a very talented team, and they just don't let up. Now, the schedule has been very manageable so far. They do have to play Michigan and Ohio State. I expect them to be favored over Michigan. The only game I expect them to lose this year is at Ohio State. So you take an 11-1 Indiana, I think they do indeed make the playoff this year. Now, I think the Big Ten title game we'll come back to a rematch of that Oregon Ohio State game, that classic that we saw in Autzen Stadium a couple of weeks ago. Now they'll be playing in Indiana. Ohio State will be a slight favorite, but that'll be a great game. But I think Indiana definitely has a great shot at making the playoff this year, and what a story that is.
Yeah, and we talked with the we haven't had Coach Signetti on yet. We had Coach Bielema earlier, and he was talking about his trip to Oregon this week. Do you it sounds like if you're projecting Oregon to be in the Big Ten championship game, it probably doesn't include a loss to Indiana or Illinois along the way. Do you think that the Illini stand a chance out there, or what do you expect that to play out like in Outson this weekend?
First of all, hats off to Coach Bielema. What a job he's doing this year. You take a look at that. Luke Altmaier, for example, last year was average quarterback. This year, he's an outstanding quarterback. He's got a 15-1 ratio. His top running back goes down. They replace him easily with McCray and Lowry. The defense last year took a step back. Now they're playing outstanding defense this year. I love what they're doing. I think it's going to be a tough situation for Illinois this week. However, they're coming off a game, and Coach Bielema said post game last week, you don't beat Michigan preparing for them 7 days of the week. You beat them by preparing 365 days of the week for them. Now, if you do that, there's going to be a letdown the next week. And traveling out to Autzen Stadium is one of the toughest venues in the country. I like the Ducks to win that game, but you look at the rest of the schedule for Illinois, I could see them winning their final four games, getting to 10-2. And in my mind, you get 10-2 Illinois, I'd put them in the playoff. What the heck?
And one more question on the Big Ten as we're looking at this. You see kind of a cluster of teams at 2-2 there. Some you might have expected to be there, some who maybe not. But is there one of those 2-2 teams that stands out to you as kind of most likely to finish strong here?
I think when you're looking, I'm going to go with Iowa out of that mix. And Iowa had a very disappointing game last week, but I like the run game that they have with Caleb Johnson. He's already over 1,000 yards this year. They have an outstanding defense. And you look at their final five games. They host Northwestern this week. I've got them favored there. They host Wisconsin. I think they're the better team. They can win at UCLA, at Maryland, Nebraska. I'm going to call for Iowa to go 5-0 down the stretch, finish the season 9-3, and have an outstanding year.
Yeah, that would be a very Iowa thing to do. They always seem to be in the mix as a 9-10 win team at the end of the year, and we've had them down here a couple times recently. As we look at our bowl projections from the media for the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl this week, we're not seeing any Iowa yet, but we are seeing, as we discussed Illinois and Indiana a lot, we're seeing a lot of that on the board from the Big Ten. The SEC kind of is a smattering of teams. You see a little momentum for LSU, a little for A&M, a little for Alabama, which might not have been expected at the start of the year. Are there any of these matchups that jump out at you as a game you definitely want to see?
I think if you put Alabama in the Cheez-It Bowl, wow, you've got yourself a heck of a team, because I don't think Bama's going to lose a game the rest of the year. And I think that would be a really nice matchup against anybody. But can you imagine a matchup like Alabama against Indiana? I think that would be a really fun thing. And of course, Kalen DeBoer was at Indiana. So to me, of the matchups that I'm looking at on that board right there, I would go with the Alabama Indiana one would be the most intriguing to me.
And I believe that would be a Citrus Bowl debut for the Indiana Hoosiers as well, if they were to make it down here, which would be another kind of interesting footnote in all that. In any case, Phil, we really appreciate you being with us this morning, kind of taking us through our conference standings and our bowl projections. We always look forward to having your magazine in our lap each fall or at the start of each season, and we look forward to talking with you again down the road sometime.
And keep in mind, I'm a big Pop-Tart fan. So I always enjoy watching the Pop-Tart board. That thing last year where they had the big Pop-Tart and then they ate them at the end of the game, that was a lot of fun. So keep that stuff going. And always great talking to you, Sam.
Absolutely. We'll find a way. I think we sent you some great Pop Tarts after the last time you were on the show with us here. So we'll find a way to get some more grapes to your door to resupply your stash.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate that, Sam. They're tough to find in the stores.
It's an art to getting great Pop Tarts, but we found a way. So we look forward to it. Thank you again, Phil.
All right. Thanks, Sam. Have a good one.
All right, take care.